Good morning, my lovely students, or good afternoon, or good evening, or whenever you're listening to this. We're going to get into some specifics now about India. And I really like this background. It reminds me of the monsoon rains, which come in the summertime in India and bring life to the subcontinent. I also am intrigued by this title, the Vedic Age. So the Vedic Age is going to refer to the scriptures in Hinduism, which are called the Vedas, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And the video that you're watching on India gives such incredible detail to this time period. The reading that you're doing on India gives such incredible detail to this time period. This presentation is going to hopefully organize your thoughts about this fascinating subject. Now this time we only have one essential question. Unlike most presentations where we have a number, we only have one here. And our essential question this week, or for this lecture, is what impact did the Aryan invasion have on the Indian subcontinent? And the response to that is going to be, it's a significant impact. It's going to impact everything about India at the time and still has tremendous influence on India today. Now, from our last presentation, right here we have the Black Sea, right here we have the Caspian Sea. In between these bodies of water is the Caucasus Mountains. Just above this would be modern Russia, Kazakhstan, the Ukraine, these areas right here. This is extreme Western Asia and Eastern Europe. This area right here is the area of the Aryans. This was a group of nomadic people 10,000 years ago that were so prolific and moved around the entire Eurasian landmass. They were aggressive, they were warlike, they were who Adolf Hitler idealized, the master race, the supermen. And as you can see by this arrow, they go pouring into the Indian subcontinent right through the Khyber Pass between the Hindu Kush and the Himalaya Mountains. Now these individuals are going to have incredible impact on Indian society. And if you look in India, this map of India, like here would be the Hindu Kush, the Himalayas, here come the Aryans. And they just didn't all happen at once. This took place roughly roughly 3,500 to 4,000 years ago. This mass migration takes place. Now, in the video, they talk about this civilization here in modern-day Pakistan, which was headquartered there, called the Harappan civilization. And by the time the Aryans came into the subcontinent, the Harappan civilization had waned, was virtually non-existent. And so that created this amazing void that these aggressive, horseback riding, white supermen moved into this part of northern India and then spread throughout the subcontinent. We also talked about a very early migration from Africa, and these would be the people that settled in the southern portion of the subcontinent, and their culture is collectively known as the Dravidian culture. So it's going to be the northern Aryans and the southern Dravidians, and it's going to create a struggle between the two that you can still see evidence of today. One of the ways that you can see evidence of this is in the racial makeup of India. The people, there's different, India's huge. I mean, we're talking about 1.2 billion people. But various Indians look different because of these migration patterns. People that are of Aryan descent have to have more European features, whereas many Indians have darker features of the more of the African immigrants. And this is Minda Kaling, who's obviously a famous actress in the United States, and she'd be a good example of a dark-complected Indian that was probably the product of African migration. This difference between lighter-skinned Indians and darker-skinned Indians is significant, as you're going to learn. Something else about the North and South is they're different culturally. The people in the North are going to speak languages that are derivative of the Aryan incursion or invasion or migration. People in the South are going to speak languages that are derivative of their Dravidian culture. But here's something else. Religiously, they're different. This is a fascinating character. This is Zeus, people. He is the father god of the white Europeans. And he comes sliding into the Indian subcontinent about 3,500 years to 4,000 years ago. He's known by something else in India. He's known as by Indra. And whereas to the Aryans, he was the big god, through the melting pot, which is Indian religion, his status gets lowered. But he's a male, he's warlike, and then check out the southern gods. They're not gods, they're goddesses. It comes in various form. There was this mystic river that you learned about in the video that would have flown in, or that would have flowed, not flown, flowed into the Indus River. It was called the Saraswati. And very little is known about this river. Many people might think that it is mystical, but there's a goddess, the Saraswati, who was popular in the southern portions. And she characterizes a lot of the wonderful things about feminine qualities, which is the artistic nature of women. But it isn't just the artistic side of women that's emphasized in Hindu mythology. The goddess Kali, the goddess of time, the frightening goddess, is also an example of the female worship that comes out of the South. We're going to talk extensively about the imagery in this photograph before this unit is over. It's quite frankly one of my favorite images of a Hindu goddess. And fear not, she's only there to help you. Those people she's getting rid of are there to hurt you. She's your protector. And finally, the beautiful Parvati. If you look, suckling Parvati's breast is Ganesh. This represents motherhood in all its powerful forms. So the female goddesses of southern India represent protection and bravery and martial skills, but also motherhood and artistic expression. Okay, when the Aryans arrived, the Aryans brought with them the Hindu faith. The Hindu faith is a product of the Aryan migration or invasion or whatever you want to call it. Now, this amazing faith is very hard for Westerners to grasp, and obviously it went through quite a transformation when it arrived on the subcontinent. But people like that are Christians, they'll say, what is your Holy Scripture? A Christian will hold up the Bible, which is the New Testament and the Old Testament. No problem. A Muslim will hold up the Quran. Well, for Hindus, it's not that clear. There's so many writings, as we're going to go through in this unit. It isn't just one book. It's many, many books. It is one God, but it's many variations of this God. There are up to 330 million variations or manifestations of God in Hinduism. Now, the four Vedas are going to be the four foundational books of Hinduism. These books were not written down for a long, long time. They were passed along through oral tradition. There was an ancient Hindu language called, Aryan language called Sanskrit. Sanskrit wasn't even written down until probably about 500 BCE. Before that, it was just passed on orally. Now, there was a reason for that. That was on purpose. It permitted the ones who knew how to speak it and knew what it meant to have tremendous power over those who could not. Now, Sanskrit writing today is prevalent, and it's some of the most beautiful writing in the world. You can see some examples right here. Here are the four Vedas. This one right here, the Rig Veda, is the oldest and it's foundational. And no one knows how old it is, but it first was written down about 2,500 years ago. Now, this individual right here is very significant to understand this whole concept. This is a Hindu priest. This is a Brahmin. It's the highest social class there is. They are the keepers of the Vedas, the keeper of knowledge. And they control things. And for many years, they were loath to have anything written down because it would be a threat to their power. So understand these Brahmin characters and their significance. By the way, I like his outfit. All right. A big concept in Hinduism that you must understand is this concept of Varnas, or social class. Now, this is where things get tricky. Varnas literally translated means color. And if you haven't guessed already, the lighter skinned you are, the better off you're going to be. It isn't just in the United States where that's the case. It's also true of India. The people who set up this system were the lighter skinned Brahmin Aryans. And so they're going to rig the deck to protect their position. And this is a fascinating concept right here, this fascinating concept of Purusha, the original man in Hinduism. If you look at him, he's covered in images. And the myth goes as follows. When he was sacrificed, portions of his body became all different parts of Hindu society. So his sacrifice is going to set the wheel in motion of humanity. And various parts of his body are going to become various social classes. From his mouth spring the Brahmins. The Brahmins are the keeper of knowledge, the ones that transmit it to other generations or to parishioners. The arms are going to become Kshatriyas. These are the warriors. The legs are the Vaisyas, the merchants, and the feet are the Sudras, the unskilled laborers. And I'm going to go over each one of these. A helpful way to think about this is to think of it in terms of a pyramid. The Brahmins are on top, the Kshatriyas, the warriors, are in second place, the merchants are in third place, the Sudras, the unskilled laborers, are in fourth place. But what the pyramid doesn't show is the majority of Indian civilization that doesn't even make the pyramid. These would be the untouchables or the pariahs, and we'll talk about those momentarily. And if you look on this thing, it also says non-Aryans. So the darker complected people are going to be lower on the pyramid. Here's just some cool images I thought I would share with you. The Brahmin is in study. He's reading. He's sitting in the lotus position, ready to give a sermon to parishioners. The Kshatriya is the warrior, the defender. The Vaisya is the merchant. Now, it's kind of interesting in American society, I would say business people would probably be up top. Maybe business teachers, business people, athletes, and celebrities would be on top, politicians. But in India, the merchants are down. They're in the middle of the social class. Now, this would be like you guys right now, unskilled laborers, Sudras. They do the work that is important, but not as respected. If you work at Burger King, you are a Sudra. If you don't have a degree, you're a Sudra. But here's the thing, the vast majority of Indian civilization didn't even make the pyramid. These are pariahs or untouchables. You can see this character right here is climbing out of a sewage hole. They do jobs that are beneath everyone else. Now, one of the big jobs of untouchables or pariahs is to take care of burned human remains. They're the ones that cremate people and then sweep up the ashes afterwards and give them to relatives, which is considered very unclean work, important work, but unclean work beneath everyone else on the social pyramid. Now, what keeps this whole system rolling and what justifies poor treatment for lower classes is this whole concept of reincarnation. The concept in the West is that life's a one-shot deal. You have one opportunity here on earth to make a positive impact, and you can either do well or mess it up. In India, you've lived multiple numbers of times. It's an Eastern concept. It's not just in India, it's also in Buddhism as well. You get reincarnated over and over and over again. Your goal in this life is to learn lessons so you can have a positive reincarnation. And the thing that makes this concept go round is this concept of karma. But one thing that I want to show you here is one of my favorite images from India. There are three main manifestations of God in India. It's Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. If you're someone who is a Christian, you might want to think of Genesis, the book of Genesis, and then Jesus comes along and saves people, and then the book of Revelations destroys the world and starts anew. It's kind of that concept right there. Shiva is absolutely one of my favorite gods, and yes, that is a god, it's not a goddess. Although he has a lot of feminine characteristics, he's got his dreadlocks flowing out underneath his helmet. If you look at his left foot, what you'll see is that he is dancing on a dwarf called Apasmara. And this dwarf represents ignorance, someone who doesn't understand the whole concept of what's going on. And around him are these flames. And these flames represent the circle of life and death and rebirth, the circle of reincarnation. And he's dancing on this dwarf to represent his sheer joy and mirth in the entire process and how he understands this whole thing. But the Apasmara, the dwarf of ignorance, does not. Just beautiful. Now, the fuel that drives this whole system is karma. And you may have heard the concept of karma, like he has bad karma. There's a wonderful program called The Big Bang Theory, in which Raj Patel looks at Sheldon Cooper one time, and he's talking about Hinduism and karma, and says it's positively Newtonian. In other words, there's this concept that seems to make perfect sense. What goes around comes around. Love this comic with the dude pushing the big rocks like dominoes, and his pushing those rocks aggressively is going to be his demise. Another concept that's really important is the concept of dharma. And all this means, very specifically, is do your duty. Now we're going to read a brief passage the next time you come in on something called the Bhagavad Gita, which is a foundational Hindu text on this concept of duty. So, everybody has a job to do. Whatever caste you're in, it's your job to fulfill the dharma of that caste. If you do that, you'll have positive karma, and you'll be reincarnated in a favorable way in your next life. And I just love this comic. Now, this is actually a comic featuring a Buddhist monk, but they have the same concept. You have one day on the shores of the Ganges, you got this Buddhist monk coming up, and he sees this scorpion who is going to be drowned in the water. He reaches down and saves it, and the scorpion promptly stings him. And so the reporter is saying, why do you keep rescuing the scorpion? All he does is sting you. And the Buddhist monk responds, it's the scorpion's job to sting, it is my job to save. So each one of them is fulfilling their dharma. Another important concept in really all Eastern faiths, and I love this picture, is this concept of constant change, samsara, the concept that you are not ever the same person a minute later that you were a minute before. What is you? I mean, what constitutes you? Is your hair you? What about when it gets cut off, or a fingernail? Is that fingernail? Is your body you? Regardless, look at a picture of yourself from a number of years ago. You're not that same person. You're changing constantly, all the time. Change is the one thing that is a absolute. The fact that it changed. Change does not change. How's that? So this concept of samsara is crucial to understanding not just Hinduism and Buddhism, but Eastern thought. Now finally, you might ask the question, what happens if you are this incredibly altruistic, wonderful Brahmin? How do you get reincarnated? Well, there is a point in which you have evolved past reincarnation and death, and this is called moksha. Moksha, if you're a Buddhist, you would call this nirvana. Or if you're a Christian, you might call it heaven. It is this concept that you have evolved past the concept of life and death. You have lived a whole string of lives in which you've done the right thing. You've had good karma. You've fulfilled your dharma. You've got to the top of the human heap. You've done it again, and now you've transcended that. Okay, youngins, that's your big old-fashioned Vedic age. That's why the Aryans were so significant.